First, I'd just like to thank everyone for coming to this impromptu thing I've made. I appreciate it. And if we can't get to everyone's questions, I'll try to get them answered at some point. So, there's that. I suppose my first question. Oh, we have people joining still.
We might as well just go for it, and then we can fold them in as we go along.
Yes. My first question was sent to me by Elcio. So currently, the game appears to be geared towards the more history buff sort of player. Do you have plans for the more casual players, and do you like plan on targeting a more casual audience?
Yeah, I mean, sure. I think anybody's welcome to play the game. That's for sure. Now, we're definitely approaching it from the perspective of, hey, World War II, actual ships, what's important about actual ships, and so on and so forth. And that's not likely to be something that we'd ever necessarily change. Um, but we did spend a lot of time making the combat as I don't want to say obvious, but as clear as possible, so that you didn't have to know the terminology in order to just play. And we did that for the casual players. Now, you guys, or many of you guys, have definitely moved beyond that. I wouldn't necessarily describe any of you here on this call casual. So you're asking for the more detailed stats and so on and so forth, and of course we're going to expose all those. But the overall reason why we just settled on perf and damage and all the rest of it is just so that people could play, and it's the same reason why we went for over leveling too, right? Like if you didn't want to optimize your way out of an encounter, well, you can grind it out, and you'll be successful that way. And that's again a concession to the casual players.
All right. I've got a few more questions from Melcia. They sent me on around 6. Next one would be, how in depth is the future tutorial supposed to be, or is it going to be, or do you even have that planned yet? Really?
I mean, I honestly don't know. I think that'll be something that's likely to evolve. So all of the tutorials will be more or less about the same depth as the current tutorial. So actually, we've already finished like crafting and promotion, and I think there are a couple others that I saw in there as well that are in the queue. Um, but they're going to be to a basic orientation level. Like this is how you refit equipment, and this is what's important about promotion. You got to fill it all in, and all the rest of it. Getting more in depth in that would be very difficult to do in a way that would be useful or understandable to a player. I think we're going to probably end up going the route of most games, which is that there's a certain amount of like discussion and auxiliary kind of sites and resources that you use to really get in depth if you're not a casual player.
By current tutorial, do you mean the one that's currently in now, or the one that's coming, presumably next update, or the one after that?
I don't know at what point. I think Wigbert, you were here right at the beginning, yeah.
Yeah, I've been playing since the beta started.
Then I'd say probably, that first little piece. Now it's already been augmented, but you wouldn't know it because you haven't you
Yeah,
started
I haven't seen it yet. Yeah.
right. But yeah, that first little piece is what I mean. About to that level of depth, it orients you. It's like, here you go. This is where you are. This is sort of what's important. And then if you want to go deeper than that, then you'll have to go deeper.
All right. The next question is, will your starting nation affect the League of Nations story at all, or any story for that matter?
Yeah, it's a good question. So originally, like, and I'm talking now about even before the Kickstarter, seven years ago or so. Originally, there were nation stories. So there's not just a League of Nations story. There's also a nation story. Now, we have not talked to you guys about the metagame yet. That is going to come in the next couple weeks. When we do, I think that is probably going to answer, sort of the real underlying question, which is which choices matter. So I'm gonna I'm gonna wait for that discussion to happen before I, open my big mouth.
All right, so wait for the metagame to really come out before that becomes important.
No, in a couple of weeks, what I've heard, the plan is that we're going to kind of reveal or talk to you about the impact of the metagame. And when we do, you'll understand the degree to which you have the ability to shape the course of the story and what that will mean for your chosen nation.
Ah, I see. The next one from Alcia was, do you plan on having events like other gotcha games, and what exactly would these events entail?
Yeah, I mean, to a certain degree, right? Events already exist, so there are gotchas based on a few maps that change per month, and those maps which are changing are sort of like, tied into which bells you can get from them and which equipment and so on and so forth. So in that regard, there are definite events. Now, I think probably where Elsia is coming from is there might be some more packaging around like other games events like, oh, this is what's important, we're going to call it XYZ, and you go to this one map and you clear it on hard mode and you get X shards or what have you. um and we might end up going kind of a similar route, but I think overall we prefer like, sort of more player choice and interaction in terms of where you want to go and what you'd like to do at that particular time. Now, there are some super cool ideas for how we would handle monthly activities as we go forward, but I think for the time being, we're probably just angling towards, yeah, it's you can choose to get involved in this or not, as the case may be.
All right, and the final one from Alcia, which I like this one a lot, is do you plan on including things around Christmas and other holidays? I guess sort of special events that way.
Yeah, it's a that's an interesting question, right? Because as you guys know, the time component of the game is very important. So when the game launches, it'll be September 1st, 1939, and that means whenever we launch, 3 months from then, or 4 months, or whatever it is, 3 months, it'll be Christmas, right? Like in game, but it won't necessarily be Christmas out of game. So I think the way that we're probably going to address that or solve that is in game, we'll have some Christmas related stuff. But when Christmas rolls around out of game, we're going to have other things that might pop up on your feed or in the store at that particular time. But if you're looking for a Christmas story, you'd have to wait till it's Christmas in the game.
All right, so related things could happen outside of the game, but the more in-universe stuff will be when it takes place in the game.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, well, that's all of Elsia's questions, so I guess I'd open it up to others because I'll do my questions last since I set it up.
All right, well, I guess I can ask my question or take a turn. Um, One of my big questions is, how does reserves currently work within the game as a mechanic in terms of the numbers behind the screen?
Yeah. So reserves is just basically a number of rounds that your bell can withstand combat before she must withdraw. And they range in values from, I don't know, like 4 all the way up to 10 or so, I think. And you can get various enhancements to that from equipment or from vest or promotion, which directly affects whatever that base is. Now, when you get to, like, for example, let's say your base was 5 and you got yourself a trait that increased it to 5.5. When you have a decimal like that, it tells you that you've got 5 rounds guaranteed, and then you have a 50% chance of lasting a sixth round. I know Urza in particular was experiencing some difficulties where they were seeing, like, they might go at round 5 or they might go round 6. Usually that's the reason. There's some value in between that's creating that. When the stat display, the detail stat display is rolled out to you guys, I think it'll be very easy for you to see like what's going on with reserves. But in a nutshell, Soulheart, that's how it works right now.
Okay, so does that mean, like, say if I put a reserve booster on a gun in my main battery 1, and then I do that to my guns in main battery 2, will those reserve buffs stack, or is it one of those cases where it's the strongest buff will take effect, boosting reserves?
No, they stack. You're definitely encouraged to grow your bell in any way that you see fit.
Okay, so then just one more clarification on that. I'm assuming is it on a per battery or per gun basis?
Good question. It's per battery. Yeah, that might be a little crazy if it was per gun.
Okay.
Wait, I want to clarify that. So, does each battery stack? I didn't quite understand that.
Yeah, the answer is yes. So if you have like a 5% increase on main battery 1, then you got a 5% increase on main battery 2, that's 10%.
Would that be calculated together for your AA 1, 2, and 3 as well?
I don't know on that one. I know the main batteries pretty well. I don't know how the light batteries work. I don't know if they're rolled up into one anti-air buff or if each of the batteries themselves stack. That's a good question. That was Wigbert. I don't know the answer to that.
That wasn't me, but I'll take credit for it.
Oh, okay. Bad stock. Okay, good. Yeah, no, that's a solid question. Wigbert, I think you're going to send out the thing, right? So when you do, I'll kind of poke around on Monday and see what the answer to that is.
Yeah, I plan on making this an editable document that I can go back and just change when needed.
Okay, cool.
If I would like to ask a more targeted question following up on that, then, and forgive me if this sounds aggressive, but what's the purpose of reserves from a gameplay standpoint? Like, why isn't the system just 3 ammo per fleet, and then every battle is a duel to the death? Like, what is the development intention with a mechanic like reserve? Because as you've seen I explained, it seems a bit like you lose no matter which way it procs as a player.
Yeah, I don't think that's aggressive at all. It's a good question. So I don't know that I'm totally qualified to it, but I'll give you an answer which I think is probably right. So of course there has to be a finite limit, right, to the number of rounds of combat, right? So just hands down that has to exist. I think the idea was to sort of create something interesting that you might have to play with in order to create more lasting engagements or less lasting engagements based on how you expected to be fighting. So bells that are fighting at long range are expected to slug it out for a very long time. They need a high amount of reserves. Whereas that's a stat that you might optimize in a different direction for if you're intending maybe closer, sort of quarter like knife fighting, right, in the night and so on and so forth. So I think that was really just purely the intent, is to allow you guys to have, if you had the patience for it, like longer engagements. You want to have those big gunnery duels, but at the same time enable players that just want to go quick, to be able to do that without having to set in stone after 5 rounds you're done, right? Or after, right.
If I could ask a clarification question, then that explains the usage of the system through the player. Why have an equivalent system for the Morganas?
I think what's behind this is, like it sucks when Morganas run away. And I felt that.
no, even more than that. You said that like it gives the players a tool to control engagements work, but the Morganas are not something the player controls. The Morganas are randomly determined, basically, based off of drop tables. What's the purpose of that?
Yeah, I think so. So again, maybe other people would disagree. Well, I guess I'll find out. But I think I'd say that I don't know that we necessarily expect you guys to really be not investing in your scouts or in other ways to determine the composition of your flow, your foes, so that you can do some changes within the campaign itself. And part of the reason why there are so many fleets out there is so that you can kind of tailor-made, how you want to engage based on what you find. I think that if you were straight up like, hey, there are 5 fleets and you're just going and that's the expectation, then I think you'd be right. Morganas don't really need reserves because the player can't plan, can't plan for it. But I don't know. I think sort of my general feeling on this is that you've got a pretty broad toolkit, And I think the hope is that there might be interest in sort of, playing around with that toolkit as you get up to the higher level approaches. If that's not the case, then I think we might have to revisit, but like that's certainly the hope.
Okay, so to ask, basically like an example then, to make sure I understand it. So the idea behind having both, like, bells with different amounts of reserves, whether by gear or for other reasons, and then having Morganas that have various amounts of gears, is the idea is that you go into like a campaign, you see your bells, you know what equipment they have in theory, right? You see the Morganas, and you can take a guess as to what the reserves might be, and you might go, oh, that Morgana has a very low reserves. I better put my short range fleet on them, which probably needs to have a lot of reserves because short range fleets need to close, right? And then versus, oh, I know that's Treason, and Treason has crazy reserves, so I can throw my long range BB fleet at them. Is that kind of what you're describing?
Yeah, and I think also like positionality too, right? So if I see a fleet or I've scouted, I understand that there's a fleet with cowardices or a lot of cowardices or ships that are standing off and then escaping, so on and so forth. I might try to circle around or try to catch them or to send a fleet in that general sort of direction to prepare for the expected outcomes of engagements. I think that was the general idea.
Okay.
Or just engage them at night.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I guess my follow-up question though is, if that's the intention, then, like, as far as I can tell, when you scout an enemy Morgana fleet, you can't see the fleet's composition. You only see their flagship, right? The chibi little flagship. You don't actually see their composition.
Yeah, I sort of recall, or I thought, and I could be totally off. I sort of recall that there was a way that you could do it. Certainly, if you're attacking them, either subs or aircraft, obviously you're able to see it. So I thought that there was a way that you could look at it. But the funny thing about all this is that when I look at my my build is full of dev tools, so I never have this problem. You know what I mean?
Right.
This is why it's really good to hear from you guys. So if that's an oversight where you're not able to see the composition of the Morgana fleet, that might be a circle bug, worthy sort of addition.
Yeah, if other players can cooperate this, I think literally the only way to tell is either Airstrike, right, which tells you the composition. But that's I guess you could kind of argue that's like scouting, and that you have to scout first, but it's really not, because you have to build two different ships, right? You have to build a scout ship plus an airstrike ship.
Yeah, that's definitely not scouting.
Or the second way is to have a chaff subfleet whose only purpose is to verify like enemy fleet compositions, or a chaff DD fleet that does something similar.
Now, I do like having a subfleet sit on nodes so I can see who's there, and then I just decline the attack, right? Like, so I have done that before to see, who's coming. But yeah, suffice to say, if you're not able to check the Morgana composition, and I could be wrong, maybe that is intended. I don't know, but it seemed to me that probably you would be able to radio that back and you would know.
Okay. Well, I'm definitely going to circle that, because if the intention is what you described, it doesn't make sense that you don't know what the compositions are until you bumble into them, and then they retreat because their reserves are really low, and then you just waste an entire ammo and torpedo salvo, and some of these maps don't even have bases on them, and you're just like, well, reserves is a sucky mechanic.
Yeah, the what is it? Some of those deep ocean ones. Yeah, I've had that pain.
To chime in here on this topic for just a second, because I hopped into the game to check this. During a sortie, there's currently no way to see the full composition of a fleet, and there's also what it currently seems is there's actually no way to tell what the flagship of a Morgana fleet is if that Morgana fleet is not in motion. You could only tell what the flagship is if it's moving into a node once it's scouted.
Right, because the chibi doesn't appear. That's right. That's right.
Oh boy. I mean, this is just for reserve specifically, but like if there are other systems that depend on this idea that the player reacts to what the Morganas are bringing to the table, that also breaks when you can't actually see what they are.
Yeah, no, I mean it makes sense. I mean, that's assuming that everybody agrees, but I think that answer is right, and that probably means that there needs to be the ability to see them. Incinda, it looks like you got a question there about airstrikes with 2 fleets.
No, I would just reiterating the point that there's also the case of if you airstrike with a fleet that has 2 nodes on, it kind of randomly selects which node you're airstriking. So if you want information, you might get information on a Morgana fleet you already have information on.
Yeah. No, actually, I know that part of the logic pretty well. That's actually intended slightly. There are some factors there about which side the Morgana's entered, and then theoretically, which fleet your scouts would encounter first, or not your scouts, your airstrike would encounter first, and then because we all saw, naval aviators have little or no patience. If they see a target, they go straight after it.
So are airstrikes going to arrive at targets faster because I have recruit outrunning my planes sometimes?
Yeah, that's actually so. It's interesting about this. So the origin of this particular one is, let's say you want to airstrike a fleet that's in motion, and so you've got a Morgana fleet and they're off and running, and you send your aircraft after it. Now, in the real world, your scouts told you, hey, they're traveling in such and such a direction and such a speed. And, if you're lucky, they're shadowing them so they can maintain contact with the fleet. And so your guys, launch, and they've got a pre-programmed or pre-planned, sort of area that they're going to go after. And then they're going to start their search and they're going to find the fleet, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So in Victory Belle, of course, things are a little bit more constrained in the sense that you have the node branches, right? You're not actually open ocean. And so we came into this issue where, okay, how do you know when you launch a airstrike on a Morgana before they hit a node? How do you know where they're going to go after that node? And the answer is, we don't, right? Like in some cases, it's random for the Morganas if they're hunting you or if they're patrolling and so on and so forth. So then you kind of go, okay, so then we could make it unfair to the player where if you don't send your aircraft, at the right time, then the Morganas can evade you simply by choosing some node, right? And that seems a little, ridiculous. So we said, okay, so we're going to have you go directly there, but then how do you pre-plan? How do you know where to send the aircraft? And again, you don't, because you got to draw that out visually, right, on the screen. So we said, okay, as a hack, we're just going to make it a flat time to get anywhere within your scouting radius. And we don't do that anywhere else, right? Like scouts travel at their exact speed and so on and so forth. So the reason why you're able to beat your aircraft there is because of that flat time. Now, one of the members of the team that works in this particular area was on vacation for the past 2 weeks. So he's coming back on Monday, and it's on our docket to figure out how we're going to deal with this. But yeah, that's the reason behind that nonsense.
Okay, I was just worried that a recruit might be using some illegal modifications.
Sure. Well, she's a flat bottom ship, so technically she can go faster than any ship that has a draft, right?
I guess I'll ask one of my questions now.
Go for it.
So this is more story related, so I'm not sure if you'll be able to answer it, but how many volumes are planned in each story, or is that even something you have planned yet?
Well, no, it's yearly. So you guys are reading the 1939 stories, and then in 1940 there's a new set that follows on what you guys just did. So there's a new romance and there's a new friendship, and then in 1941 there'll be another set, in 42, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
All right, so volumes just correspond to years.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay.
So building off of that real quick, for say the 1940 friendship romance option for a bell. Say I've done that for 39. Do I have to pay prestige again to do that in 30 or the subsequent years?
I don't think so. I think the idea is that if you are on a friendship or a romance path, which is a premium path, I think whichever one is appropriate just unlocks for you in 1940. I mean, I don't, I'm not working in that space, but I'm not aware of any features that would cause you to have to pay something else again to access 40 content. It just appears whenever that particular Bell's event is.
Okay, so say someone who starts later in the game cycle, they'll basically have it when they get to it, so to speak.
Yeah, they would never have experienced a time which they didn't have it. So you could theoretically, like if you start like in 1940, you could theoretically do 1939 and 1940 content just back to back.
And is there an expected time frame on when stuff is going to be released with the 1940? Is it all going to be released just flat when 1940 happens, or is it going to be divvied out over that year essentially?
No, it's divvied out. So I think it's something like, well, I can't remember, but I don't know, 10 or 12 bells per month or something like that. And basically, in the same event structure that we have now, there will be events corresponding to those bells, and their story will be featured. You know, the usual rigmarole.
Okay.
Going off again off the future content aspect, are there plans to have roadmaps that the given out to the community so we can see what's coming ahead? Like, for example, Girls Frontline has a monthly roadmap, so to speak, that is generally handed out a couple weeks in advance so that the player knows what major events the game's got planned for the upcoming month.
Yeah, so I as a gamer, like if I switch stances and I'm just a gamer like you guys, I love roadmaps, right? I love to see what's coming. It's exciting. It's interesting to me, right? Like it rekindles my interest in the game and whatever I'm playing, and I can imagine and speculate. So I like roadmaps in that regard. Of course, on the other side, there's it's harrowing to release a roadmap simply because while I know exactly what new game mechanics are coming in October and November and December, I can also say, without any hesitation that, well, if it tests okay and it works well and it doesn't break the game and there's no, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I would think that we'll probably do some roadmaps. I don't know exactly if we're going to do it like, Girls Frontline, or if we're going to have some quarterly thing, or if we're going to have some sort of producers yearly thing. I have no idea about that. But I think we all like them enough where, yeah, we want to do it. But let's let's make this thing feature complete first.
I actually have a question about feature completeness that I would like to ask.
Sure.
Because a topic that has been circulating lately among a lot of us has been the subject of a gallery, right? The idea that you can look at previous story content that's been completed without having to pay to reset your story. Is that included on that list of features? Is it something that the dev team sees as like a part of the game that is necessary either now or in the future? Or is it one of those things that's going to be perennially like, it'd be nice to have, but we're not going to guarantee either way?
Yeah, I know Wigbert has some strong feelings here as well. So I'll give you sort of the temper of the team about this. So it's kind of funny. The purpose of making you guys pay to reread isn't actually like give us your money. Although please, everybody on the call, give us your money. No, the purpose of that actually is because if we allow you to replay, and you are able to do the battles again, then you get those same rewards again. Now, we have not kind of tipped our hand on those rewards, but I think you guys have kind of seen that there are some things in there that you don't normally get from, you know, your usual drops and so on and so forth. So we wanted to keep that a little bit special. So to create an option which enables you to replay requires that you actually get like a different version of the story, or that when it comes time to a drop or reward, that it is instead handled a different way. And obviously that means more code. So I can tell you that we understand the request, and I don't think there's anybody in the team that doesn't agree with the request. But also at the same time, we're like, probably there are some things that we're going to want to put ahead of that. And I would suspect that our launch target will not include the ability to reread for free as a launch position. So I don't think you want to read into this that we won't do it or so on and so forth. Congratulations, man. But I think you should read into that if we're going to write new code and the testing that comes with that probably that's something that we're going to have to weigh in terms of prioritization.
That makes sense. That is in line with what has been communicated. What I'm more interested in is the mood that it's something that would be nice in a year one time frame. Like, this is honestly one of the things that makes us want something like a roadmap.
Yeah. Well, I can definitely say that everybody among us is a visual novel veteran of one type or another. And I will also say that it was foreign to us that you couldn't just reread. Like, I had done it before, and now I get to pop up in that chapter and revisit and reread and so on and so forth. So I think that from our standpoint, it all sounds like that sounds like an obvious feature. I just couldn't tell you whether or not we're going to see that in the first 4 months of the launch, or if that would be in 1940 sometime.
Okay. But the general mood is that it is something that is sort of expected to be there eventually.
Yeah, I mean, it was pretty obvious to us that it's a gap. Like the reason why we even enabled the pay to go back and read option is because we were like, hey, I want to reread this, but I don't want to have to code, right? And as it turns out, we did need to make it so that you could replay, so that you could choose a different version of romance or friendship, like if you wanted to like switch that. So we knew that we had to do that for players, but yeah, we implemented it for the foundation because we were like, yeah, I mean, I would want to reread it, but at the same time, we don't want to spend the time to change the code or create a different version at this time.
Yeah, I think everything you make sounds good, and it's an answer that satisfies me. I will just say that the choice to do that has sent very strange messaging to your player base. At least the close circle around here. It's like, well, are they just not going to do it now because there's the paid feature? Like, that is the thought, like, going through my head at least.
No,
when I think about it on a very cynical level.
The pay feature is so that you can make a different choice, romance and friendship, and so that you could get more story rewards if you wanted that special class of like reward. That's the purpose behind the prestige cost.
I'd like to go ahead and just ask a couple before Urza comes up with another 4 questions off the top of his head.
Oh, I have 5 already. Get in your
one of these, I think Wigbert might already have down, but it was something that was talked about the other night. And that's just in regards to the free prestige gain. I'm trying to get the right wording for it. Basically, you can earn up, I think, what was it calculated? Like 480?
That's, to be fair, that's based off of a 28-day month, so that only really considers February. If we bump it up to 30, the actual number comes out to be about 505.
Okay, so
510,
then,
excuse me.
Okay, so in that case,
So
just ignore that question then.
Yeah, between 480
because that
and
was essentially the
505.
main thing. The other one, one of these is probably more a jank question than a new question, but seeing as I have you on, one of them is in regards to like the people that are doing the wiki, for the purposes of making sure that it is accurate. Will they be able to ask the devs questions on particular things for the purposes of creating the wiki and making sure that is as accurate as they can make it and up to date? Or
I mean, we're pretty informal. I can't remember who it was. Somebody in my inbox, and I bet you're on the call right now, so excuse me, was asking for like the line template that we use. And yeah, sure, right? Yeah, that's. I don't think there's any surprise there. Now, giving you guys the actual content, now you got to go hunt for that, right?
yeah,
But
but like one of the things that was talked about was like like similar thing with the Kang Cole wiki, where it has like references and like voice lines where it's like, oh, Cossack's voice line for the 5 o'clock hour is in reference to this thing that happened with HMS Cossack, or this thing that's related to, or whatever. And like stuff like that, would they be able to ask questions of that?
I'm sure they can, but Welly, I got to tell you, and you probably know this. Um, on a project as long as this, finding the individual who made the reference, that is more of a difficult problem than than just posing the question, right? So sure, yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's no harm in doing it. I do think that in general, though, like um, and you guys probably think this is perverse, but it's true. We find tremendous enjoyment in you guys like figuring out stuff. Like, oh man, um, I still couldn't believe that. I still couldn't believe that Elsia was able to find Chiyoda's reference. I mean, that one lasted for what, 5 years? Everybody kept going like, why is she into golf? You know, like we love that kind of stuff. So, well, we even when we know, we might not want to share it, but just so you know.
Okay, and then the last question, and this is one that I just thought of today. Um, Without going into too much as to which bell it is, because spoilers, but there's a bell that I went through the story, and basically right at the very end, revealed she has a serious medical condition. And it's like, great, good way to like humanize and whatever. But I'm already about, I think, 5 or 6 or 7 chapters into the next story, and there's not so much as even a single reference to it.
Better.
My
You got better, Wellington. What do you mean? Like she's totally fine now.
Basically, my question is in regards to like things like that. If there are bells that have like
Send that to
this,
Jacob Pop. Yeah. Send that to Jacob Pop. He'll be
yeah,
very interested to hear about any discontinuities.
yeah, but like also like if there's any bells like Cossack says about like her, and this is probably like splitting into like another question here, but like Cossack says, oh, my favorite color is X and my favorite flowers are Y. Is there going to be like some sort of like later on down the line, like some sort of like gifting thing where like you can like gift to improve relationship? Or
I don't think it's any surprise, or at least it shouldn't be, that gifts are in the game or in the works. Will they come with the relationship system that we go to launch with? I don't know. All the bells have lines for gifts, and all of their gifts are actually known to us. They are created, but I don't know if we're going to roll that out or if that's going to be part of a different feature. But yes, you should expect gifts. Gifts are cool and undoubtedly coming.
okay. And yeah, as I was saying earlier in regards to the the health thing. I just basically didn't want it to just be, oh, we threw in this thing of her having this serious medical condition to just be like a gut punch and heart punch right before you make the choice of foundation and romance, but it's never going to come up again at all. It's just purely there just for the gut punch, and that's it.
I'm 100% positive that that's well, okay. I'm 99% positive that that's not intended. It's possible that that was a thread that got lost in between different writers writing various things. So definitely take that to Jank, and then he'll, I don't know, he'll give it to Jack or whoever, but we'll take that to Jank for sure.
Yeah, and as mentioned, I'm only like the first like 5 chapters into the romance, so we'll see if I like pops up later, but I'll definitely shoot Jank a message about that.
I mean, it sounds like that should be like in the very first like story, right? Like you would think,
Yeah,
yeah, that just happened, and then you forget about it. I don't know, man. That's
like even with like the overarching theme of the second of the romance, the second story, romance or friendship. You'd imagine at the very least there'd be like some mention like right off the bat, or at least within the first couple chapters.
Yeah, that sounds like unintended.
I have a question about cruises. What is their intended purpose? Is it supposed to be a way for a player to farm things while they're doing something else? Are they intended to be the thing you do while you're AFK, like you set this up and then you go do something else for a few hours and come back?
Yeah, I think that it accomplishes a couple of different purposes. I mean, maybe the most important one is that it gives you another way to target resources that you want to get, right? I don't think anybody on this call is going to be surprised to hear me say that the rates of consumption and the rates of replenishment are definitely askew when it comes to fuel and ammo and the other rare resources as well. I don't know if we want to be too heavy-handed on that, because none of you are really playing the hard mode, nor have you specifically seen the alternate tables for rewards for the hard mode. So that's more than explanatory. But so cruise number 1 will help you get targeted rewards. Like, I need personnel. Okay, I can go run this cruise in this area, or I need fuel and ammo, so I'm going to run this, so on and so forth. The second is, of course, I got to go to work, right? Or I have to, I'm going to go to bed, right? And so it'd be nice to have my bells doing something while I'm doing that. And then thirdly, you might at times, and Wigbert, this is 100% for you. You might at times be running 1 fleet or 2 fleets, and you're just doing, you only plan on using those 2 fleets, and well, the other 2 are just kind of idling. So it'd be nice if they can do something passively, and cruises kind of satisfy that. You can get drops from cruises, you can get resources, and of course you guys are all aware of experience.
Okay, that's what I assumed, but I just wanted to make sure.
Yeah.
Building off of this, if I may, one of the things that I think at least a couple of us have noted from a concern-wise is at least in the current build, the major experience gain from cruises is due to recruit. However, that's entirely contingent on recruit's level being higher than the bells that you want to level. And I feel, at least with the current setup, I don't know how it's going to expand down the road, but I feel there's a potential noob trap here when the player starts to unlock light cruisers, that their first compulsion will be to cycle recruit out of their fleets, which in turn creates a problem where if they want to level up a new fleet, recruit's low level is going to severely hinder that. And I'm just wondering if there's any thoughts for potentially at least not maybe giving the same level of bonus, but give a reduced bonus amount, so it's not entirely. So if recruit was cycled out too early, if you will accept that term, that the player does not feel burned by that decision.
Yeah, so we heard you through Wigbert. I think Wigbert and I talked, I don't know, the other day. Oh my God, I don't even know when that was.
It was in the email I sent as well.
Okay, good. Um, yes, we understand the concern. I think that the first thing that we want to do, though, Soulheart, is we want to get you guys to actually use the longer cruises. So right now you got a 15-minute cruise and whatever piddling amount of XP, right? We want you guys to experiment with the other cruises and kind of see what sort of XP gain you can get from them, and then of course what recruits contribution looks like in those. And then I think you guys can make another kind of reflection about whether or not recruit needs to be special in this way. And it's not just recruit. I think you guys saw Amerigo Vespucci. She's a training cruiser as well. I'm not a cruiser, but a training ship.
All ship.
Yeah, tall ship. Yeah. Speaking of order of precedence, by the way, this is kind of interesting. So the tall ship should be first, right? Like you put Amerigo Vespucci into your fleet, and she will be the flagship always. Now we we didn't inflict that on you guys, but like it did occur to us that hey, actually, Amerigo Vespucci comes in the lead. But let's talk about this, Soulheart. I think after we've got the cruise duration in, and then. If you guys still feel the same way, then we can talk about various ways that we could kind of, sort that out.
Sounds good.
Wellington, since Jacob has joined us, do you want to just briefly kind of touch on what you were talking about earlier?
I already sent him a message. So
got it.
Yeah. Long and the short is that has to dig into it a bit, but.
Yeah, Voikov's not one of the ones that I'm intimately involved or experienced with, but I'd have a look at it because we definitely do. She has the condition that she definitely do want to give the sort of representation and impact that it deserves for a variety of reasons, both specific to and just for the sake of not just having a narrative crutch to lean on.
Your mic cuts out while you're talking sometimes.
Has it been cutting out?
A little bit. It might just be due to push to talk, though.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's that. I was having connection issues earlier today, and I wonder if I don't know.
Oh well. Okay. Next question.
About the cruises, what were you planning on doing for the cruise durations then? Were you planning on having it so that the short cruises are the most profitable if you can constantly keep them running, and the longer ones are just for convenience? Or were you planning on reversing that and having the short cruises just be kind of there?
I don't know that I know I'm not proficient enough with the math behind them, like what that balance looks like. I do find for myself, thinking about the calculator, I do find that I would most likely use short duration cruises to fill a stopgap or maybe pick up equipment, like get some drops. And I might use the longer cruises for resources. But yeah, I couldn't say how it's balanced amongst the resources. I guess we'll find out here pretty shortly.
The calculus I had been going with in terms of resource distribution is you'll notice the backyards and the sort of lower level and short duration cruises are a little more weighted toward fuel and ammunition. That's to facilitate going out and campaigning. It used to help with cruising as well, of course, but that's less necessary now that the cost is going away.
Yeah, although Hasdock, I think what you're really asking is what is the amount of resources that I'm going to get in relation to the time that I spend in the cruise? Yeah.
It's just
Incinda, by the way, for your question about info on story authors, I don't know exactly when the credits are coming. We have a big long list. I don't see any reason why we couldn't break it down that way. Currently, everybody's just listed as who they are, versus specifically what stories they worked on or contributed to. So we'll have to. That will be some additional work, but we could take a look at doing that. I don't think we'd do that before launch, but I think we could take a look at that for sure.
Individual story author strikes me as more of a Wiki anyway.
Yeah, it'd be cool though, and it might be neat to have in the game as well. But probably in Cinda we wouldn't do that straight away as launch. It just too many UI elements, and there's some digging that we have to do on the back end.
Yeah.
Okay, I did have another question about scouting this time. Does scouting have any sort of effect on your gunnery if you're fighting in a scouted node?
So indirectly, yes. So if you're fighting on a scouted node, that means that any of your cruisers or your battleships with range long enough to be over the horizon are able to make their attacks. If you have not scouted the enemy fleet, then you can only begin at the point at which you could directly see your target, and you can't fire over the horizon. So, and of course, all this is weather permitting, as you might guess. Cloud cover will disrupt this, but choppy seas won't. So, if you are intending to try to get as many hits as you can at long ranges, then it behooves you to fight on scouted nodes.
So will we get the option to scout the node the fleet is currently resting on?
So although you and I have been talking about scouted nodes, it's actually scouted fleets. So any fleet on that node is scouted, and therefore, if you attack them or they attack you, they're under a condition in which they are scouted. So there isn't specifically a need, or there shouldn't be. Maybe if there's a bug here, then definitely let's raise that up. There shouldn't be any need to scout your own node. You just need to make sure that enemy fleets have been scouted.
So that they need to be visible entering the node, or?
Yeah, so if you think about an arbitrary map, right, where you're in node A and the enemy is in node B, if node B is scouted, that means enemy fleets on node B are scouted. That means if they come and attack you, they come in as scouted fleets. They are under a condition of being scouted.
And that also applies if you enter a node with a scout then. Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah. All right.
Well, if no one else is, if I can throw in another question, mine's more specific towards at least one of the benefits granted by some of the advantages. A couple of us have asked the question what a naval rifle, or not what the let me try this again. 1 second. What technically is defined as a lease base, because a number of advantages or quirks seem to provide a damage bonus in relation to a leased base.
Yeah.
But there's currently no explanation for what the base or what the context or the qualifications are needed for this benefit.
You just need to be on a map in which you have a base that you've invested into, so it's level 1 or above. That's what a leased base is.
Okay, and then extending off this, because I just more curious on the status of this, because I imagine a lot of us have put in requests for this, but is there any plans to create some form of a glossary for some of these terms so everyone can look them up if they're not sure what something means?
Yeah, that's definitely been a popular request, I think, from the very first day that we opened the the beta. Yeah, absolutely. what are the chances of a glossary coming in at launch? I would say that's got to be pretty small. You'd need to have a UI that would enable you to do some type of searching and lookups on, sort of basic game data, a little encyclopedia, if you will. Now, that's not problematic to create, but it does represent a somewhat serious amount of time. I think we would like to have such a thing in the game. I think it's cool to browse and learn new stuff, and I think it's also cool to be able to answer questions in that way. Now, one thing that we're likely to do as a perhaps interim step is when you're looking at stats, you'll be able to touch them, like tap them, and a little tooltip will appear, which will give you some very basic information, right? Like, rate of fire, right? So we'll have some of that, but that's sort of like an interim step. I wouldn't call that necessarily a glossary or an encyclopedia or anything like that.
Okay.
I have a question that Urza and I have discussed a few times over the past few days. So Urza has researched a bunch of the early Japanese destroyer rifles, and he noticed a very similar statistical, just where the stats are very similar between them all, and he wanted to know, how do you determine the statistical difference between things that are so similar, and are there traits, like if you say you research one, do you really need to go through researching all the others?
Yeah, so I think Zombies had the same sort of point, a couple, I don't know, a week or whenever that was. And you're right. Like, it's really not. And if you think about the process of R&D and production, right? You're not researching the gun is one thing, and then there's researching the mount, and then it's all the stuff that goes into the ship and hoists and whatnot, and then you have different flats, and then you've got the magazine and the shell storage, and all of these things really deserve to be treated differently, right? And there might be some commonalities based on the turret is the same between the two, and that portion of it doesn't get any gremlins, but the trunk and all the rest of it, that's that's all brand new and has to be created, and so on and so forth. So there's absolute logic in that. But of course, to do that, right, like if you were to put that into the game as it is today, it would inflate the game's data model, and that server is already creaking, right? Like we're absolutely the highest definition mobile game out there, like period. Right, nobody's doing anything like this. So I view that as an opportunity to expand when we get into crafting 2.0, which is like super cool and takes into account those kinds of details. But like for our current system, it's got to be abstracted, and that means that there are going to be some things that just that's not really how it would work, right?
I will jump in real quick because this is a topic that I had raised. It's more than just this is not how it would work. The other thing that bothers me is the fact that like I've gotten deep into these guns and they kind of just look like the same baseline profile but with different advantages, like slightly different advantages. Is kind of what it's looking to me the more and more I've researched them.
Could be.
That
Yeah.
feels very bad from a gameplay design standpoint, that it takes me the exact same amount of time as if I was researching them from scratch, and I'm getting almost no benefit from it.
No, I mean, it's absolutely like true what you're saying. It's just that if we wanted to go in and make a change in that regard, either the Japanese would not have their historical specifications on their weapons. In other words, we'd have to give them a unified, like, here is just a standard, right, destroyer rifle, so on and so forth. Or we'd have to introduce new fields that are especially around, these are a common family, and therefore only need to be researched once. Because the game itself won't know that they're similar enough. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, I see what you're saying.
Yeah, so it's one of those things that like I regret that it got away. Like, what else?
But wouldn't it be possible to just give them a different quirk so that at least there's a reason to dive through them? Like, I can't imagine that would be that hard.
No, that's certainly possible. You probably have noticed that we've tried as much as we can to actually give common families the same quirk, but there's nothing stopping us from diversifying them by giving them a different quirk. Obviously, we'd have to get back into the books to understand what quirk they should get, but that's a totally reasonable proposal.
I would kind of just personally, I would kind of just hate if it became an inside player meta knowledge that you should just avoid similar family guns. You pick one, you do it, and you don't touch any of the other ones. Like that feels like the opposite of what should happen. Like it should be kind of cool to like poke around the different versions of a gun and to see the variations. Like that feels cool from like the history and Evil Wargamer. It's just not encouraged at all. Like it takes the same amount of time and there's like zero benefit. You're literally just occupying your berths for no reason, basically.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that's a solid point. So to create quirks is not difficult. As you can imagine, there's a balanced discussion, right? And it has to fit specific
and
needs.
it does take up more quirk slots, which I'm assuming does have some server load implications.
That's not too bad, right? Like it's the calls that matter, not so much the storage. So if you want to, Urza, I mean, just to get in the queue, so we're talking about it, feel free to like, toss that up as a circle bug feature, and then it would be super cool if you could, or super helpful if you could note which rifles you had in mind, and then feel free to suggest names.
I mean, I am 100%ing the Type A twin. I am 100%ing the Type B single because I have the Type twin Bs already done. You know what? I'll just do all of them. I'll get all the pictures, and then I'll send you a big slat. How about that?
Right. That sounds fun. Hasdog, that system, as you probably have guessed, actually has some support internally. Like you probably have noticed, like the gremlins and the advantages are all like, versions 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There was a time when we were going to take that route, but we're going to do crafting 2.0 instead, which is a significantly different like system. So we probably won't return to those level-based systems once we get there.
That's a reasonable concern. In which case, I bring up the like give every gun a different perk idea. Just as a stopgap, right? It's a much easier, faster thing to do to give them more differentiation.
Well, I like it because there's no coding.
Yeah, there you go.
I've got another question from Melcia and Mezabar as well. They basically ask the same thing. How do you determine the stats on equipment, balance it, and then do you plan on changing it during and after the beta? I presume yes.
So I think as probably everybody on this call knows, we don't balance the equipment in any way. It's their historical performance is known to us, and where we don't have the appropriate fields, we use kind of a numerical simulation that tells us what the stat should be or is most likely what the stat was, or sort of that generic kind of value. So we don't balance it at all. If there was a gun that was just superior by dint of material and so on and so forth, then it's superior in Victory Bells. And I know Wellington loves Nelson's torpedoes, but I'm sorry, the long lances are easily the best torpedo in the game. Probably always will be. This is the way it is. But having said that, we are open to change. If someone were to come to us and say, we have done some original research and we have discovered that the parameters of this particular weapon were not as represented in Victory Bells, but instead this, we're happy to be schooled. We've already got very knowledgeable kind of Soviet player who was kind enough to share with us the fact that Krasny Kavkaz actually has an ASDIC, a very poorly understood ASDIC, but one nonetheless, and it will appear in the next version of the game. So we're definitely open to updating if we have good enough source material. So give us all your classified stuff is what I'm saying basically.
Is
I'll
it
make
just
sure, yeah.
is it just a Soviet sailor with an earphone at the very bottom of the hull listening?
No, actually, it's interesting. So we actually have a lot of documents on the German sonar, well, ASDIC, of the time, and so there was a commercial sonar called Paraphone that was sold to the Netherlands, and the Netherlands built their own copy of it, and they in turn sold it to the Soviets. And this happened just before the war broke out. So it's a unique little device. Would I use it on any ship? No, I wouldn't. But they had it, and so they have it in Victory Bells.
I mean, that's a blessing to any Soviet ships only use Soviet equipment players right there.
Yeah, that's for sure.
So the in-game timeline moves forward, obviously. How can we expect maps to change because of that?
Well, you're sort of already seeing a little bit of it. The September maps, and Jank knows how many there are. I'm afraid I don't know the number. 4?
Not off the top of my head, but I do have the chart in one of these tabs. Let me see.
So there's a set of permanent campaigns because new players come in, you always got to be able to level, right? So there's a set of permanent campaigns, but September's maps are only available in September, and then October's maps are only available in October, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So you can expect every month to have different maps with different bells on it, and those maps, along with others, are going to be important for the metagame. And I think that's all I can say right now.
All right, and I guess as a tangential question, were these repeat when the year resets or go to the next year?
No. September 1940 is different than September 1939. You will not see September 1939 campaigns again. They're done when they're done.
Okay, and I guess again as another tangential question onto that, will the events that are currently in the game, the special gotchas, will they come back at some point, or are they a one-time only thing?
I don't think you'd see the special gotchas return, but the bells in them probably will come back. Like there's always like some anniversary gotcha or something, right? Like that's what we've talked about like internally is that that's probably the way that we'll do it as a part of a celebration.
So they're not intended to be, they're not intended to be like you missed them and you're kind of screwed, sort of thing.
Like if you miss the boat on like Manchester, then yeah, you're probably not going to get to play War Conditions again. Her map. But there will definitely be a time where you can come back and at least roll for her or have some other reasonable shot at getting away.
Well, actually, I'm gonna. So on that point, I don't know that. Okay, I doubt that this would ever happen to anybody on this call, especially not Wellington. If you want Manchester and you want to get her with the highest probability of getting her, then I think you want to come there and what is she, an October Belle or September Belle? You want to get her...
Manchester is September.
Okay, got it. Yeah, so you definitely want to get her in September for sure. Like that is going to be hands down the simplest way to get her. The anniversary events by their nature, it's going to be like what, like 48 bells in the anniversary gotcha. Your chances for Manchester not that great actually.
Yeah, I mean, because it's a compounding effect, right? Because it's through the plan is to operate through 1945, so you're going to have more and more of the event bells to return to. So you'd either have to be on a constant sort of rolling basis to return all of them, or else bring back a sort of best of thing.
Yeah, but everybody on this call, like one thing is for certain, everybody on this call should give us all of their money. Yeah, they didn't laugh though, Shank. That's what's scary.
I mean, I think I've already told you what I plan on spending money on at some
Well, it's because they all have PTSD from avarice running away.
Oh yeah, that's for sure. That was hilarious, actually. Cowardice had reserves of 8. That's what was going on there.
All right, but yeah, I was just mostly concerned that if it was going to be, you missed this, you're screwed forever, or if there would be chances of getting it.
No, I don't think we'd ever do a bell where. So I think I had this conversation with somebody. I don't remember if it was Urza or someone. But I mean, there's plenty. I mean, getting the bell, has to be an investment for sure. But there's plenty to do after you've gotten the bell. If that's your waifu, if you're really into her, I mean, there's no shortage of stuff that you can do with her. So we don't want to. There's no intent to ever block anybody. Like, if you didn't come and play at this exact time, you'll never get that bell again. I think that just sort of defeats the purpose.
I think that's most of my questions, unless anyone else has any.
I got
Urza,
one I
do you
can
have
shoot.
like 4 or 5 questions?
I got one I can shoot. All right. So modifications, right? I think most people here have probably read the Messer Bar shenanigans involving being able to get negative, I think, magazine weights, was it? And also just generally the conversations that have been happening around like combining advantages that are named for things in real life that should never be combined, right? I kind of wanted to ask, like, what's going to happen with the advantages? Is that a problem? Is that desirable? Like, what's going on there, basically?
Yeah, I think some of my thoughts, about this, or is it because you and I talked a little bit about this? Um, so I hope, and we're gonna find out, right? Hopefully within the beta, I hope that stuff like low angle 5 and high angle, whatever it is, 3, the combination of the two don't become the meta, because if that really does become the meta, we'll have to go in and we'll have to add in new fields and validation that is unique to this to make sure that you can only add a specific category. And I just don't want to do it. Like, it just, like, oh my God, like crafting 2.0 is going to solve this exact problem so much more elegantly. I just don't want to spend any more time on crafting 1.0. But if it becomes the meta, then obviously this is an untenable position, and we don't want to change the values to match either, because the weight losses are actually calculated from what the structure would have to do weight wise in order to accomplish that particular elevation angle with respect to the default. So we're all kind of paying attention to it. And I think if everyone sort of agrees that the best build that we can imagine is, low angle 5 plus high angle whatever, then yeah, we'll probably have to do something about it. But I hope people are going to find enough naval rifle advantages that they're like, well, yeah, actually, I don't know if I want to do that or not. I guess we'll see.
I'll ask some more targeted clarifications then, because I think you said a lot of things that I'm very interested in. So I'll take them piece by piece. The first one is that you don't like the way it works. The main thing holding you back from just changing it is the coding demands and the knowledge that there's going to be a crafting 2.0 anyway. Am I understanding that correctly?
Yep.
Okay. The second point I heard is that oh god, what was it? It was something. The second point was that you should is that in theory basically that there is a historical basis for this stuff, right? It is not just like we have an advantage, it does this thing, that's sort of fine. So you wouldn't be in other words, like one of the suggestions I had was that this is the way it's supposed to work, that just change the name of the thing. But that doesn't really sound like it's going to fly, right? Based on what you just said.
Well, I mean, anything is possible, but as much as possible, we try to keep it to real world physics, right? Like, you can break real world physics. We'll let you do that with the Bell, sort of best or promotions and the quirks in particular, right? Those are all fantasy, right? Like, but the advantages in Gremlins are based on sort of real world physics. Like if you take a generic baseline turret of X dimensions based on the guns and the configuration of the guns, and you were to expand its elevation by blah, that weight increase is about what you'd expect with, regular construction and so on and so forth.
Okay. So I guess this is sort of like I remember the question. The third clarification I have is you mentioned that like you would be forced to do something if it became the meta build. If it was
it's
right.
just dumb, right? Like
Yeah, if it was
Yeah,
if it was a build that was common, not overpowered necessarily, but very common, because it makes sense, right, from a min-maxing stance standpoint. Just slap the two together, they cancel each other out, boom, value, right? If it became common but not necessarily overpowered, would that get touching, or would y'all be inclined to let it lie?
Well, you know what? This is kind of interesting. So Victory Bells is a simulation, right? I know you guys at various points we've talked a little bit about balance and so on and so forth, and there has to be balance in parts of the design for sure. But fundamentally, Victory Bells is a simulation. So in a simulation, when you have things like low angle plus high angle, right, providing some sort of benefit, it chafes, right? Like it kind of burns me up, right? I guess if people are like, well, I guess this is okay, and nobody's kind of like, it's not becoming like a memed feature of the game, then I think probably I personally would be like, well, 2.0 is coming, and yeah, it's gonna fly. That won't fly in 2.0, and I think I'd prefer it that way. But if this does become the meta, then I think we'd probably have to act. Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense to me. Also, I can tell you that like based on my preliminary looks, as long as dual purpose mounts aren't complete trash, that won't be the meta. At least it won't be the only meta. It might be one of the two metas.
Okay, well that's reassuring.
Because it doesn't make sense to put low angle just so you have to mount another high angle mount, if you get what I'm saying.
Yeah.
So as long as DP is viable, then I don't expect that to be meta.
I hope you're right.
I can say that
Because it's really annoying. Sorry, what's that, Wigbert?
I can say that I don't use it, but it's because I'm lazy, and I'm like researching it again. So,
alas, that's not how theory crafters work.
That's the thing. Like, if there's a difference between something that it takes a little bit of work to do, but ultimately confers a pretty good benefit. But not everybody's going to do it. There's that, and then there's an objectively correct move, like stripping all the equipment off a Belle, send her on a cruise. And that's what everybody was going to do that. So the decision to cut out the cruise cost, right? There's a line to be drawn.
So speaking of lines to be drawn, it's getting a little bit past 7 o'clock. So let's see if we can wrap it up. Anybody got a kind of final sort of parting question?
I've got one that apparently I forgot to read from myself, unless someone else has a more important one. But mine's basically, so it's a crew question. I know I've been asking a lot of those recently, but are crew intended to be like an end game goal sort of thing?
Yeah, I think this came out before. So, and it's weird because in the first gacha, like what's her face, Schleswig Holstein, which I've totally mispronounced. In her gacha, like you can get MSK, right? But those guys are like specialists, right? Like you have to invest a lot in refit to get to where you can lock them. But yeah, Wigbert, as you kind of already seen, where the stats not inverted, crew is actually pretty exceptionally powerful. They could do things like multiply your max HP by 25%. Your reserves, all kinds of little goodies that crew has, and in general, their effects are ship wide, which makes them even more valuable. So, I think what we would normally expect to see is that you might get a couple of crew drops in stories, in particular, that you can use right away, and you grow them, R&D them, maybe spread them across your fleet, but you probably are not getting to an optimized state with them until much later in the game.
So more of where I'm currently at.
I would think you're probably the banner for where we'd expect crews, crew, not to confuse it with cruise, crew to start being used in a really optimal way.
Okay, and to add on to it just real quick, I know you intend to have a rare tag for equipment to differentiate things that you can't really obtain again. Do you also plan on having rare crew and a similar thing, unique things that you can't really obtain a second time around?
I don't think so, because the crew there are ways where you could go and like the like boy, right? Sunshard's boy. You can get boy from a variety of different ways. Like you play enough stories or get enough drops, and you can pick up boy. But MSK you can only get from Schleswig-Holstein. So MSK is going to get the rare. Now, we have at times thought about different backgrounds or rarities, but you guys have all seen we tried to avoid the standard, Mobage kind of way to handle this, because what we didn't like is the concept that, oh, ultra rare is so much better, when nah, this is a simulation, right? And it's as good as you want to make it, if you see what I'm saying.
Yeah, okay, I see that. That's basically my crew question, because the rest of my questions will come after they're fixed and I can actually use them again.
Well, I don't know, Wigbert. We're going to find out what happens when we make the update.
That's why I'm not deleting my blueprints. I need to see if I can fix them first.
Yeah. Well, I mean, usually producing them will reset it, and that's usually good enough to get you back on the right track. Okay. Anything else you guys have at the kind of burning urgency before we turn down?
I was wondering, I submitted a bug report about it earlier, but did you ever find out if there was some sort of connection between the frame rate of the game and damage being dealt by the bells?
No. So we had a pretty involved conversation about all the different ways in which that shouldn't be possible to happen.
Because I can recreate it for you on video.
Yeah. So we have a bucket of stuff. So a lot of you guys have experienced very, shall I say, interesting crashes. You might not be able to report them. You might not be able to circle bug them. Maybe the hardware itself isn't generating a bug report, so on and so forth. Our intention is to close out what is maybe 80% of the experience of the beta. Like, most people are able to play, it's working as intended. We got in all the stuff that we'd like to have in before launch. And then we're going to take a little bit of time to maybe add in some additional reporting or additional sort of error handling that's going to let us investigate. Because the very first thing that we did, Hasdock, is we went over to, we have a PC build among other builds, and we did the exact same thing. We just started controlling the frame rate, right? Like, let's see what happens. And it just went slow, right? Like, there wasn't any difference or any speed up or so on and so forth. So this is going to be something that we're going to have to spend dedicated time to understand what's happening. And we'll probably do that after we've closed out like the majority cases, if that makes sense.
Okay. It's just, I think it's not actually tied to frame rate anymore. I think it's tied to the processing power of whatever is running the thing.
Okay. See,
I was able to recreate it on my phone too. It's actually kind of sad because my phone naturally creates the bug.
All right, so that's actually an important clue, because like we couldn't replicate with frame rate, but we weren't doing anything with like resources available. So that's kind of interesting. Okay, anything else anybody wants to raise up? Going once, twice. Okay. Well, first of all, Wigbert, thanks for putting this all together. I know that kind of behind the scenes you've been doing some coordination. I mean, I think that's fantastic. And to everybody, not just you guys, but also the folks, on the regular server. Hasdock, there's no way I can comment on that. But there are certain bells that just seem very obvious, right? Like that we would have because of their fame or because of what they did. So, you know, you can think about Helena's contributions and decide whether or not that would fit her. Oh, and you're gonna love the metagame actually, so we'll have to talk about that. But nonetheless, thanks everybody. I really appreciate it. This this was pretty fun. So you know, if we want to do this again, I'm always down to spend an evening with you guys.
Yeah,
Wigbert,
I'm hoping to make this a sort of semi-regular thing, maybe once a month, sort of Q&A thing.
okay. I mean, that seems like
Sounds good.
yeah, that sounds good. All right, Wigbert, you wanna bid us all farewell and close this up, or?
Yeah, thanks everyone for coming. This has been the first impromptu Q&A session. I think we got a lot of good stuff in here done. I'll write this up later and put it out in a, not a Word doc, but a Google Doc so people can actually look at it. If anyone actually has like if anyone took an audio recording, that'd be great because I'm sure I missed a lot of things. Great, that's wonderful. So yeah, other than that, I guess think of more questions at some point.
All right, thanks everybody.
All right.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you all.